All right, so a very welcome to another episode of the Legi webinar. Today I'm thrilled to welcome Tobias Heckermann, the CEO and co-founder of Sherpany, and Christian Menzi, the Customer Success Manager at Sherpany. So thank you so much for participating. And
happy to be here.
Great. And so I think the very first question I'd like to ask you is, could you, both of you, say just a couple of words about yourself and your main responsibility at Sherpany?
Sure. I'll let you start. Thank you. Yeah, so as the title implies, I'm the CEO, so I'm basically responsible for, let's say, the overall success of that company. I started my first company when I was 18 in the security industry, blue-collar worker, so low-margin industry. Bumped my head a couple of times there, learned a lot on how to deal in an environment where you have low margins and high volume questions. Then started Sherpany as my second venture and have been leading that company since the starting point in 2011. And since then, it has been an interesting journey. By now, we are 110 people around the globe, mainly focused on Europe as our core market, but we have people all over working for Sherpany.
Great, thank you. How about you, Christian?
I joined the company in quite an early stage. That was back in 2013. We were still a bit less employees in the company. My responsibility as a customer success manager is taking over basically customers once they signed to go for the Sherpany solution, and I am their main touching point for the whole customer journey, so including onboarding, regular updates, member onboardings, etc., everything that is implicated. And as a kind of an internal side project, I'm also responsible for the shareholder management using Legi.
Yeah, so this is why we also have both of you today on the webinar. Exactly. Great. And so the webinar, as usual, will be first structured by a part where we will learn a bit more about Sherpany's history and where it stays today. And then in a second part, we will go more about how you as Legi users are using Legi. And so for the first part, Tobias, I would love to hear from you a few words about the story of Sherpany, how it started, and what it's all about.
Yeah, sure. So interesting enough, I think our starting point is very, very close to what you're doing right now. So when we started 2011, we had the vision to build to create or turn shareholders into ambassadors. We were convinced that especially larger enterprises that have 100, 200, 300,000 shareholders around the globe, it should be easy to get them connected closer to each other to ultimately turn them into ambassadors, because who else is easier to turn an ambassador than a shareholder? He has a mutual interest that the company does well, right? So we built our first product, which was the investor service, Sherpany Investor Service, which was basically sort of a streamlined Facebook for shareholders to connect the companies and the shareholders directly and let them interact with each other. We built that up, were quite successful in Switzerland, had the opportunity to talk to a lot of board members, executives, CFOs, CEOs, and so on. And after a while, they came back and said, yeah, obviously you know how to build great applications and great apps, but we have a much bigger problem, digitizing of our meetings. And then we were like digging into that. What does it mean, digitize meetings? What do you really want to do? And we learned about the entire meeting processes and what it takes actually to get senior management meetings and board meetings done in the right way and properly done. And that there is a lot of scattered applications used today between like some applications, emails, Excels, Words, some file storages and so on. So we built our second product, which is Sherpany, the meeting management platform. And then 2015, we decided to focus fully on that because we saw an even better traction on that area. Yeah. And then we decommissioned the investor service and fully focused now on our meeting management solution. And that's what we're doing since 2015 with full focus. And since then, we're chasing our vision of building a world where every meeting counts and relieving enterprises and people in bigger enterprises from the meeting madness.
Got it. And so, as I understand, Sherpany was founded in 2011. And so it's been a while now. And what would you say was one of the biggest challenge along the way for you and for the company? And what did you learn from it?
I think that the single most biggest challenge is to keep focus. I think that's something that also led to the decision back in 2015 to focus on one single product, one single problem that we solve, and not two different products with two different stakeholders and so on and everything that is surrounding there. And that this has been a challenge moving forward. And when we started the company, my idea or my understanding was that the bigger you get, the more you can do. And reality is the bigger you get, the more focus you need. So I think that's something that continuously brings a challenge to the table to make sure that everyone is focused on one single vision, one single mission, and knows exactly which goals we are chasing, and that we are all pulling on the same rope into the same direction.
So really,
because you all can also pull on the same rope but in different directions.
True. So really kind of aligning the whole team for one goal.
For one vision, one mission, one goal.
I love that one. So thank you so much for telling this story. Now I'd like to switch to how you as a company are using Ledgy. I think the very first question I have is still for you, Tobias. So can you tell us a bit about how you used to manage equity and shareholders before using Ledgy?
So obviously we started with our initial product, turning shareholders into fans. We were also very open for private investors when we did our first and second funding round. So we thought having a broader shareholder base will help us actually also promote our brand. So during the first two funding rounds, we accumulated a shareholder base of around 60 shareholders, which we actively then managed and tried to constantly inform and keep engaged with the company to turn them also into ambassadors from ours. And this has been working quite well. So I think so far we have been able to really also generate inbounds and generate interests coming from our shareholders that have been talking to peers of them or to people that they know that ultimately need also or had a need for meeting management. So looking at that, this was always one of the purposes. So how did we do that? We used classical spreadsheet to manage our cap table, then mailing lists to ultimately inform them about what happens. We tried to use, or we used also our own product for some parts of the communications. So all in all, that was a bit the setup that we used. But in our product, in investor service, we were focused solely on the communication between companies and shareholders. But we had no functionalities surrounding cap table management and everything that is surrounds that, and also projections of how the cap table could evolve when you do financing around all these kind of simulations.
Understood. And so once then you learned about Ledgy, I think you, Christian, then took over the management of the equity. And so now I'd love to talk more about that part. And the first question I have for you is, what was your wow moment when you decided, okay, it totally makes sense to switch from back then when you used to manage your equity in a spreadsheet to now Ledgy?
Yeah, there were some crucial moments, especially when looking at transactions. So when stakes were moved from one shareholder to another, or also granting of options, this was becoming more and more challenging. In our spreadsheet, I remember we worked with colors, where we said, okay, the shares are black and the options are red, and we had to really make sure that we don't get lost on that really big spreadsheet, how it became in the meantime. So what I very much appreciated in the Ledgy was the fact that transaction can be easily captured and managed, and that is really, you don't have to take care about all the rest around it, but you just capture the transaction and done. And another thing that delighted me really from the first moment on was the fact that I was always in a good touch. If anything came up, I had any question, I received immediate support, even by yourself or by Ben, or by other employees. So that was really a great moment to be supported in that process. And that gave me also the conviction then to finally convince Tobias to make the switch towards Ledger.
Great, that's great to hear. And so now I'd love to switch to screen sharing so that we can show the guests here how it actually looks like. So let me switch to screen sharing. All right. So could you show us, a couple of features you really like in Legi and how you use them?
Yes, it's a pleasure. So what certainly is very interesting for me is the stakeholder overview.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that on a stakeholder page, I really easily find who owns the stakes in our company and which type of stakes they have. So I see who has the common shares, who has the options, etc. So that is really helpful to have that. Then further on, and as I already mentioned, the transaction part is really helpful, because in the transaction section, I simply go and capture from to. I see the amount. I see everything that is behind those transactions. And one important part, especially in our use case, is the fact that we always need to add documents to a transaction, and that can easily be done here. So I can simply attach a PDF or multiple to a transaction, which then makes it complete for us. Then another area which I appreciate a lot is the cap table area, where we have a simple and easy, understandable overview. I mean, these numbers, they were all somehow present in our spreadsheet, but not in the same appealing way. It was sometimes hard to get the real number out of it. So this is really convenient. And last but not least, if we do equity plans, for example, if we do option granting, this can be easily done here as well. So we have, for example, an option pool, and then I can simply say, okay, I grant from the pool to a shareholder. I put a date, an expiry date, a strike price, naturally the amount, and that's how I could easily add documents to a transaction.
Yeah.
So that's really straightforward, and that's basically exactly what we need.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So, and you also mentioned before the fact that you really like the fact that it was transactions based, and I think it's really actually one of the powers of Legi, that you just put in all the transaction, and basically what it then does, it kind of compiles out of these transactions the current status, which is the cap table. So when I talk to user, I always like to tell them the transaction is sort of the past, so all the data up to today. The cap table is the present, and you can also model the future with the scenarios, kind of these three parts. Yeah, so you now talked about the stakeholders and also the employee participation plans, the equity plans. And I would now like to switch back to a more general question about these two topics. So the first one is about shareholders, and I think you thought about this question a lot, as you also said already, but what would be one of your tips about how to engage your shareholders?
Well, I think the key aspect when it comes to shareholders is that most of the shareholders, or most of your investors that you're going to accumulate during your growth path as a company, they are not just investing into the company because the financials are right, but they invest in the future because they believe in the team, they believe in the company, in the product, and so on. So I think they're all aware that the company needs to do well moving forward, that the investment pays off. Having said that, I think often it's underestimated how strongly you could leverage your shareholder base by asking them simply what and how they could help you on what. So we try to really reach out to our shareholders on a regular basis and be very precise in what we would like to get from them. Intros to customers, reviews on Capterra or on or intros to Gartner or ratings in the app stores or you name it, and they're gonna do, if you specifically ask, they're gonna do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Because they want to help you. And I think that's also something how you can leverage your shareholders, and it's beautiful for them too, because they can do more for the company they invested in, and it's gonna build bonds, it's gonna build their identifications. They will think about you more often. They will have you on top of your mind. They will then more often recommend you in whatever conversation they have out there with people they meet, with peers they have. And you never know which of them could bring a potential strategic partner, a potential next big investor, a potential great customer. You don't know. So I think leveraging that is something that I would advise to everyone is don't underestimate investors, and especially if you have like smaller investors or private investors, they are even more keen in just helping where they can.
Yeah, we do the same. So we also try to be very specific about the asks towards investors. And I think what you mentioned about this proactivity is key, because you cannot just wait and hope that they will, that the shareholders will try to, help you or give you feedback on specific things, but it's actually way better to also be proactive from your side. So yeah, really agree. And then the second question, and actually the last question, is about employee participation plans, so equity plans. And as you might know, in Europe, it's currently a hot topic, because the number of people owning equity from their companies in Europe is way lower than in the US, for instance. And I was just wondering, at Sherpany, how is that topic considered, and how is the resonance among your team?
So at Sherpany, when we founded already, we set up a participation program, which is voluntarily. So everyone within the company that have stayed with Sherpany for more than 12 months can decide on himself and on his own on how much of his salary he would like to receive in options. And that's it. Very simple, very straightforward. The options will be valued based on the last financing round minus a discount of 30%. And that's how they can participate. And it's up to everyone to decide on whether they want to or not. And for me, three key things. First, it needs to be super simple. So also when they participate in the option plan, there is no vesting, there is nothing. It's like, it's part of their compensation. So you also don't take away their compensation after a certain while. So why vesting? Right. So it's really part of that. And second part is like, I think also maybe one reason why it's different in the US and then in Europe is maybe the openness to risks. And I found it important at Sherpany that we are giving that choice to every employee on whether he wants to take the risk and the opportunity, so the downside and the upside, or not. Whereas I think in the US, it's often modeled into the compensation plan itself, so there is no much choice. And yeah, and last thing, at Sherpany, I don't see a big correlation between participation and identification and engagement for the company. I think identification and engagement with the company has much more to do with the culture you build in a company, and whether you really trust your employees, empower them, and give them freedom to actually grow and take responsibilities, rather than having them participating or not. I think I don't see a big correlation on that within Sherpany.
So you basically see equity plans more as a reward than as an incentive for employees?
Yes, I see it as a reward, and I see it as an opportunity for those who would like to participate in the future success of the company to do so. But at the same time, I see the need for whatever reason people have that they need cash now instead of potential cash in 3 years. So for us, it was always important to pay appropriate salaries, and then give the decision to the employee to decide whether or not he wants to take the cash or go for options.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. All right, we're coming to the end of this webinar, so thank you again for this interesting conversation. And maybe just some last words, what can we look forward to at Sherpany for 2020?
Yeah, well, we're going to chase our vision of building a world where every meeting counts. And therefore, our key purpose or key target this year is that in Europe, every larger enterprises, bigger than 1,000 employees, have heard about Sherpany and has tried Sherpany. So we're investing heavily into marketing and sales. To everyone who is out there who is looking for a new sales job, please apply at Sherpany. It's a great place to work. And that's what we're aiming for. I think we are super successful in Switzerland. We have great traction coming in Europe in different markets. And now it's about scaling it and making sure that every potential customer knows about us and has an impression on how we can get them time back when it comes to meetings.
Great, thank you. So thank you so much to you as well, the audience. And as usual, we will upload this recording on our YouTube channel, so you can check it out there. Thank you.
Thank you for the time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.